Hello and welcome to the first Spoopy Month's podcast of ProtoBalls Talk. I'm ProtoMet.
You say you've got stiff joints? You know what that means. You're a witch.
Oh shit.
You better burn them at the stake.
Today we'll be taking a look at Witchfinder General, a film starring Vincent Price and a bunch of other people.
Who are unimportant. Apparently. No, it's just a bunch of character actors, actually.
Yeah.
All you need to know is this is Vincent Price, because we're doing Vincent Price month for Halloween.
Yeah, 2 months for Vincent Price. That means 3 Vincent Price movies.
All for the price of...
And then, of course, the obligatory Halloween.
And yes, of course, the obligatory Halloween, which is... Oh, God. I just realized which one we're doing. Can we end it early?
No. But we don't have to deal with it right now, because today we are taking a look at the Conqueror Worm.
Yes, the Conqueror Worm, as it's called in the United States, or the Witchfinder General, which is...
I said the actual title.
Yeah.
Why was it renamed to the Conqueror Worm in the U.S., you may ask?
Because Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah, they were just trying to make it seem like it was part... They were just trying... Before... So that the audience is aware,
Yeah.
The only reason they renamed this movie to The Conqueror Worm was to try and tie it in with some of the other Edgar Allan Poe movies that Vincent Price had appeared in prior to this.
But you know what this means? This movie is an excellent segue from the Edgar Allan Poe movies that we did last year.
I'm pretty sure we did those 2 years ago.
No, we did it last year, I think.
I'm pretty sure last year we did 3 Dario Argento films.
Oh, yes, that's true. Okay, never mind.
So not nearly as...
Okay.
But bear in mind that this movie has nothing to do with the Conqueror Worm.
See, that's why it immediately hit me. I'm like, I knew we did those movies. But now it's not as good of a segue.
For the record, we did the Universal Edgar Allan Poe movies, which do not have Vincent Price in them. They do have Bela Lugosi in all 3 of them now, but they have nothing to do with Edgar Allan Poe stories.
Yeah.
In fact, this movie could have just simply had "based on a true story" slapped on its poster, and it would have made more sense than retitling it to an unrelated Edgar Allan Poe story. Because today, we are watching Witchfinder General, which is also referred to as Matthew Hopkins' Witchfinder General. And this is a movie based on the very real Matthew Hopkins, who was the self-proclaimed Witchfinder General. A position that the Parliament never actually issued.
Yeah, this is during the Second English Civil War, as it's called.
So during the English witch hunts.
Yes. So it's the Second Civil War because there were actually 2 civil wars during the same period of time under King Charles, because the first one. I can't remember what exactly the first one was about, but the second one was him trying to sneak off into Scotland and basically hire the Scottish military to invade England, who he is the king of, but he's also the king of Scotland. So he's basically saying, I am the king of both countries, so I'm going to use an army from another country that I am a king of to invade the country that I am the king of.
Not that that's super important for this
It's not
movie.
super important.
It's kind of a tertiary detail for this film.
Right.
Because this film focuses more on the witch hunting aspects of...
But to put it into context, that is sort of the thing that's going on.
The backdrop. To explain just why things are so fucked up with regards to the witch hunts.
Yes, like...
that are occurring. Why the witch hunts are even able to occur in such brutal fashion.
During peacetime, before the Civil Wars, and even after the Civil Wars, witch hunts were not nearly as bad as it got during this period, but because it was a period of lawlessness, and
which the film is quick to establish.
Yeah. It's a period of lawlessness and like there's no judges hanging about, like there are no judges or whatever. It's just a bunch of lawyers going around accusing people of being witches and then just lynching them just because they have the crowd on their side.
I feel I should mention that Matthew Hopkins is also infamous for basically establishing the witch hunting practices that were used during the New England witch hunts.
Yes.
So he's an even more horrific person than you may have initially realized.
It's worse because stuff like that was not common in that time period. It was just in the English Civil War, and then because the Puritans are fucking nuts. So I'm saying this right now, the Puritans, the Pilgrims, they're not, we're not coming over to practice our religion free from the English.
From what I understand, the Pilgrims were not so much traveling to the Americas to seek religious freedom, so much as get the fuck out of our country, you religious freaks.
Yeah, basically they were
you guys are nuts!
Basically, they were as extremist as they come, as far as Christians go. They hated the king, they hated the Pope, they hated Anglicans, they hated Catholics, they hated like any other religion that wasn't them. They hated. They considered anybody who didn't agree with their ideological Christianity as, fakers and Pope lovers and bastards. And so they went to New England, they founded Massachusetts.
And they've been a success ever since.
Yep.
No, but all joking aside.
So, putting it into perspective, witch trials were not a thing, but because
of just the lawless nature of what was going on.
Yes.
They kind of just happened.
They happened, and, nobody was punished for it. Because it's the middle of a war. A king had just been, murdered by Parliament a scant few short years later. It's crazy. The English Civil Wars are fucking nuts. They are... Imagine if Anthony Hopkins is in this movie.
Matthew Hopkins!
Yeah. Oh, man, Anthony Hopkins, Hannibal, Witchfinder. He eats witches.
I'm pretty sure that's the 5th Transformers movie.
Yes.
I've never actually seen the 5th Transformers movie because the 4th Transformers movie was terrible.
Yes, Matthew Hopkins and his partner. God, his name isn't even important enough.
It is listed somewhere?
It is listed somewhere, but I can't remember the guy.
John Stern.
Yes, John Stern. Yeah.
And we have Vincent Price playing Matthew Hopkins, and at no point is he even attempting to affect an English accent.
No.
I can't even imagine him trying.
Vincent is just like, I'm starring in this movie, and I'm doing my normal accent, and you can't make me do an English accent. Fuck you. It makes me stand out more.
And it certainly does.
Yeah. Everybody else, has like a fucking Cockney accent and shit. And here's Vincent Price, he's
I wouldn't say they have a Cockney accent, but they definitely have a British accent.
They have a very British accent. It's like heavy.
From what I understand, this was mostly filmed in England.
Uh-huh.
So
it was likely filmed in England and Wales. So, because of that countryside. Nevertheless, yes, Vincent Price is like the marquee star here. And the only reason I chose this movie first...
It's because we couldn't find the Raven on the Blu-ray sets that I picked up.
We couldn't find the Raven. Otherwise, we would have started with that.
Yeah.
I also lied a little bit. I had never seen this movie before that point. This was my first time watching it, and boy, it sure delivers in the uncomfortable factor.
Yeah.
So how does this movie start?
With a bunch of soldiers pursuing rebels.
Yeah.
In the forest. Specifically, we're focusing quite a bit more on a Roundhead soldier by the name of Richard Marshall, whose fellow soldiers kind of ribbing him about having a girlfriend back home.
You've got a girlfriend, yeah.
But Richard is able to distinguish him. He grazes his commanding officer's arm.
Mm-hmm.
But is still praised for having such an incredible shot. And as a result, he's given a couple days off, so he decides to head back to Browerton. It was Browerton, right?
I believe so, and that's where he meets the abbot.
Brandiston.
Oh, Brandis. Yes, and that's where he meets
his fiancée Sarah
and the abbot, which is kind of interesting.
It's Sarah,
uncle.
It's her uncle, but he is the local priest.
He is the local abbot.
John Lowes.
Who does not exist, by the way. So this movie is almost entirely fictionalized.
Yeah.
Outside of the names and the historical setting, this movie is not...
Yeah, spoiler alert. What happened? The fate that Matthew Hopkins and John Stern meet in this movie is not reflective of what actually happened to the real people.
What happened?
So bear that in mind.
Yes. What happens to them is they both end up retiring.
Yeah.
So bastards always live long lives.
Except in entertainment. Unless they're popular characters. I mean,
right.
I mean, look at Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, right.
I mean, technically they're both dead, but that hasn't stopped them from. But so anyway, Richard returns, and the uncle actually expresses concerns and hopes that Richard will agree to take Sarah's hand in marriage and get her out of the village, because he has a really bad feeling about what's been going on lately.
Gee, I wonder why.
But Richard does agree and proposes to Sarah, and they have a night of passion.
It's very uncomfortable. Like, this movie is very uncomfortable, and that was one of the scenes where both of us were just like,
well, this is happening.
Well,
okay.
this is happening. I guess we gotta wait through it.
It's not that bad. I mean,
it's not bad. It's just very awkward.
I mean, kind of. But...
Just two dudes watching a sex scene in the middle of a horror movie. We're just like, so when's the killing start? And it comes. It's coming. Oh yeah, because the movie begins. The movie begins with a hanging.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. A very brutal hanging.
But
and it sort of gives sort of the benchmark for just how uncomfortable this movie is gonna be. It starts with a very graphic hanging.
But before Richard and Sarah can be wed, Richard must return to the front lines to serve his country. And so he heads off, and on the way he passes by a lawyer and his assistant.
Oh yeah?
Oh yeah.
Oh yes, of course, yes.
A lawyer by the name of Matthew Stern and his associate John Stern. Fucking hey.
I was waiting for it. I'm like, he fucked up. I'm not gonna say anything. He'll figure it out.
And I did.
You did.
I fucking did.
These two are riding into town because a bunch of townsfolk are like, hey, we got a witch that we want you to...
And while they're riding into the village, they're conversing with each other, and it's fairly clear that John knows that this whole thing is just a setup so that they can earn some money, and he doesn't mind because he gets a cut, and he gets to torture people.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Matthew is...
like, Hopkins is like one level of fucked, but then Stearns is even
beyond that.
Beyond that. Like, Hopkins is a Knight Templar who genuinely believes he's doing good, and Stern is the jaded psychopath who's just in it because he can torture people and get money because of it.
I mean, they both know that they're terrible people, but Hopkins hides behind the veneer of I'm doing the Lord's work.
It must be done. The ends justify the means.
And John's like, yep. And I'm the means.
And I'm the means. Fuck. They ride into town and they fucking go up to what's his name, the bishop,
and he's the one who's accused of being a witch.
So they fucking torture him in the most uncomfortable way possible.
They tear the back of his shirt off and start pricking him with needles.
They don't just prick him with needles. They fucking dig that shit into him. Like, viciously. Like, how big were those needles? They were like
they were quite long.
They were like fucking stakes. They were like wooden stakes,
but like very thin ones.
But very thin wooden.
The blood effect works on this is pretty good.
And they're just digging in there because they're
you could just feel the pain, the agony the priest is going through.
The legitimate argument that Hopkins has is, if he bleeds, then that means that the devil is not protecting him because he wants his servant.
But they've got a special spot where if it's pricked, it won't bleed, and that's the mark of the devil.
Yeah, and they don't.
Where the witch hunts were incredibly biased against the person being accused, to the point of just being outright flying in the face of biology.
As it was understood in the 16th century. Sorry, 17th century. Barbaric. People who were accused. By the way, the Salem witch trials, the folks who ended up being the jury at those trials some years later wrote a public apology, basically admitting that they were wrong to have done though. It was their own paranoia that took them over. But no, not here. Not here. No sense of honor, no sense of remorse for what they're doing.
Unfortunately for the priest, because they can't find the devil's mark on him, they instead have him running around a table with the help of a couple villagers.
Yeah.
While he's still bleeding from the back. Now, while this is going on, Sarah does what she feels she must in order to try and protect her uncle, and so basically offers herself to Matthew.
Which he takes. Because of course he does.
Vincent Price in this movie is a creep and a sleaze, but a very charismatic one.
Yes. He does not, he doesn't smile at all. Vincent Price, usually, he's very cheery and very sociopathic and smiley in his movies. Not this one. He almost never smiles in this movie.
Yeah.
He's just he's very stern, he's very solemn. Even when he's, about to just rape this woman. And mind you, that this is what it is. She may be giving consent, but it's under
duress.
It's under duress.
But Matthew does agree to her terms, and instead of continuing to torture the priest, just has him locked up.
Yeah.
Not so good for the woman in the cell next to him, apparently, but who just kind of gets arrested off screen.
Yeah, she's just there.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it even scarier, is because there's no explanation for all the people that get killed in this movie. There's very little explanation.
They're just accused of being witches or associated with those who are accused of being witches.
Yes.
But on one of Matthew's little excursions to meet with Sarah, John decides to go check out what's going on.
And, looky what he finds.
So the next day, when Matthew has to ride out of town on business, he decides to take advantage of it and be even sleazier.
He doesn't even go for consent. He just straight rapes this.
Yeah.
He fucking straight rapes this woman, and it's just so uncomfortable because there's a guy who literally watches it, and he takes the rapist's side, which is so fucking gross. So fucking just ugh. This movie is so just gross. Ugh.
I mean, I'm glad that they cut away before anything actually happened.
Right.
The implication is, ugh.
Ugh. And so, yeah, when Hopkins rides back into town,
the guy who is watching tells him something. I guess he tells him that the priest confessed, and Stern and a bunch of the villagers claim to be witnesses to the priest confessing to witchcraft.
Right.
And so for one final test, all three of the prisoners are bound and tossed into the nearby river, with the assumption that those who float or are able to swim are protected by the devil. One of them drowns. The other two are hung.
Yeah.
And Sarah is distraught over it. And And then Richard comes back into town, and after seeing the devastation at the local priory, and eventually finding Sarah and learning from her just what happened, he, under the visage of God, marries Sarah
on the spot. In the church that is fucking vandalized to shit.
But it is under God.
It is under God.
And he is making a solemn vow to God that not only will he take Sarah as his wife, but he will also avenge the death of the priest.
You know what? And you know what fucking sucks about the uncle's, basic execution, right? As he's being tortured, he's chanting to himself in Latin, which is why Hopkins is like, it's devil speak. Like, this motherfucker doesn't know Latin.
I'm pretty sure most of the people present don't know Latin.
Yes, they don't know Latin.
So it's an easy ruse.
But, except for the fact that the Anglican Church also does preach in Latin. So it's just a fucking sleazy excuse. Saying, you know what? It might also be that he's speaking Latin and Hopkins knows that Catholics chant in Latin too. So he's just like, oh, he's a Catholic, therefore he must be a witch. It's just like, what the there's so many implications for that. And that's what makes this movie, like, it looks like it's only like a stream wide, but it's actually like a fucking ocean deep.
Just with all the implications.
Just with the implications that are in it. Anyways, yeah, so
after marrying Sarah, Richard gives Sarah some money and tells her to flee to another city while he goes back to service because he kind of has to, but he promises to keep eye out for Hopkins. And he soon comes across Stern. Which results in a fist fight between the two.
In a bar.
And unfortunately, the bartender takes Stern's sides and helps him escape after smashing a pitcher over Richard's head.
Yeah. It's crazy. This shit's crazy. And so, yeah, Stern gets away.
He warns Matthew, and they kind of try to lay low for a bit while Richard has to go back to the army.
And he's basically told under no uncertain terms, if you
abandon your post again, we will send the entire force of the British military against you. You will make the army your enemy. Now, I'm only doing this because I really like you. You are a good soldier, and I don't want this to happen to you.
Pretty much, yeah.
Now, at some point around this point, Matthew and John come afoul of a couple of British soldiers who they get into a bit of a kerfuffle with. Matthew is able to escape while Stern has to basically kill his pursuers and vows vengeance against Matthew for abandoning him.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Not long afterwards, Richard is basically appointed to captain because of his impressive record, and is even given an accommodation by the head of the military. Colfax?
I think so. No, I think it was not Colfax. It was
Cromwell.
Yeah,
Oliver Cromwell.
Oliver Cromwell. Yep. Sorry. I think who you were thinking of was Lord Fairfax, the head of the army.
Maybe.
But yes, Oliver Cromwell, and then Lord Fairfax, who later becomes Oliver Cromwell's rival for the rest of their lives, because Fairfax was a member of the House of Lords, and the House of Lords did not want King Charles Stuart I assassinated. Basically, they didn't want him dead. But Oliver Cromwell and his bandy of fucking House of the House of whatever it is on the other side, House of Commons, they're basically like, nope, we're starting a trial, we're gonna behead the king, and they did it anyways.
And Richard's first objective upon being appointed is to go in pursuit of the fleeing king because they think they figured out where he is, so go and investigate.
Yeah.
So Richard assembles a team, but he does let his team know that while they are going in pursuit of the king, they've also got the ulterior motive of also looking for Hopkins and Stern. And when they find that the king has escaped past the sea, the ocean, he managed to escape by boat.
English Channel.
They are forced to turn back, and it is then that they decide to, since it's on their way, to go to Lavenham, which is where Sarah is staying. Of course, it's also at about this point that Richard learns that Hopkins, who is now claiming that he suspects he's going to be appointed Witchfinder General, name drop,
yeah,
is currently there in pursuit of witches.
That's where his wife is. Oops.
And Stern also makes his way to Lavenham.
Yeah, this shit. So Stern gets there first, and Hopkins and him have a confrontation. And Hopkins is like, he's like, calm the fuck down. I did most of the work while you were gone, and I still saved your cut. Quit being a bitch. And Stern is just like,
all right,
you make a good point. You did save a cut for me, so fuck it.
And one of the executions is just absolutely horrendous. They tie a woman to a crucifix and slowly lower her.
No, they tie her to a ladder.
They tie her to a ladder, and it basically crucifixion.
Basically crucifixion.
Because they slowly lower her into a blazing fire.
Yeah.
All while the woman's husband is shouting and pleading for them to stop. Because he knows she's innocent.
Yeah.
But the mob doesn't care. And I think the most brutal part about this whole sequence of events is that there are children present watching. Like, nobody is trying to shy the children away so that they don't see what the horrendous thing that's about to happen.
Nope, it's God's work, therefore they must see it.
Oh!
Isn't that just demented?
Oh. Oh. I think now is about the point where we should probably take a break because the rest of this movie is going to be wild ride.
It's just one long chase scene, really.
So it's better for us to come back to it after a spoiler break.
Yes. All right. So, who's your favorite character in the movie? See, there's no right answer to this because every character is just kind of not outside of Hopkins is not very memorable. Maybe Stern, but like
I think Richards is pretty good as a character.
Richard is the most noble character out of all of them. As bad as that sounds, he is a soldier who, under no uncertain terms, is willing to kill people.
And unfortunately, despite serving what he believes to be his country, terrible things are happening, and his country is like, no, turn a blind eye to it. You have to serve our ends rather than your own.
It's crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
We are willing to ignore the atrocities that are occurring because our focus is elsewhere.
What do you... Yeah, I think Richard's de facto the best character outside of, what's her name?
Sarah?
Outside of Sarah, who just... She just gets so much shit piled onto her, it's crazy. And it's just like, well, she's a woman in a movie from the 60s. What did you expect to happen? Isn't that just... Wow. I
just checked to see if that was an accurate statement, and it came out in 68, so...
68, yeah.
Just barely.
Just barely. This is the same year that Sergio Leone would sort of put a lampshade on women in westerns and the movies of those kinds, where arguably the woman is the best character in the movie. Nevertheless, what do you think's the best scene? you think the
Best is subjective.
best is subjective, yeah.
I think the one that most stands out for me personally is the burning scene.
Probably it has to be the burning, just because of the way it's executed and just how fast she lights up when she goes in there, and the husband is screaming.
Like, it is an absolutely brutal scene.
Yeah.
And just showcases how brutal the times were that this kind of shit could happen in a public forum.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, it's gotta be the burning scene. Gotta be the burning scene. And, yeah, anything you didn't like about this movie? I mean, there's a lot that's not to like, but it's all...
Like, with regards to the actual film making,
yeah,
as opposed to the horrific atrocities that occur in the film.
it's something. No, because I mean, the plot, the rape scenes are very uncomfortable, but they also serve the story. They have purpose in the story, so it's not like, oh, you hate them because it's completely unnecessary. You hate it because it's two fucking sleazy villains just doing the worst thing that you can do to a woman outside of outright killing her. Ugh.
Yeah, this is this is an uncomfortable movie for all the right reasons. And Vincent Price does a fantastic job in his role, but this, Stern is an absolute sleazebag, so credit to the actor there.
Right?
Robert Russell.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he just comes across as an absolute dirtbag that you have to even wonder how Hopkins can even put up with him, knowing full well that the guy is...
Guy's a fucking dirtbag. So, recommendations.
I'm gonna go... I don't think I've actually recommended it on the show, so I'm gonna recommend Overlord. Not the anime or even the manga, but the novel series.
Okay.
That both of those are based off of. So, you know how a common story element of, like, fantasy stories are like, and then one day the Demon Lord showed up and spread evil across the land. It is now your job, oh fated hero, to save us from the Demon Lord. Overlord is basically, at least how I'm interpreting it, the story of how the Demon Lord came to power in the first place. The context for the story, however, is basically a double isekai.
Yeah.
Because it is a story about a guy playing a once popular online game called Yggdrasil, and playing as a powerful lich guildmaster of a guild called Einzalgun. Einzalgun,
Yeah.
who is playing the game on the last day before the servers are set to be shut down. And when the time comes for the servers to be shut down, nothing seems to happen. Except that now Mamanga, the player's in-game name, can no longer log out, and what's more, the NPCs that his guildmates have created are now able to speak with voices rather than text boxes.
Yeah.
And to make matters even crazier, the guild hall of the Great Tomb of Nazarick is no longer in the game, but is now just somehow transported to this other fantasy world. And it's... the series is essentially about Mamanga, who has now renamed himself to Ainzalgun to try and spread the name of the guild in hopes of finding any of the old players that he played with, and hopefully trying to figure out just how the heck he found himself in an actual fantasy world. Trying to figure out how he found his way into this other fantasy world.
Yep, pretty much.
But it is definitely a dark fantasy series, so if you go into it, expect some kind of brutal stuff to happen. Because technically our lead characters are the villains to a certain degree. Like, they are not good people, but since we're mostly getting the story from their perspective, we kind of have to accept it. And it's not like they're absolutely atrocious, despite doing absolutely atrocious things.
Yeah.
Trying to think of some other aspects to talk about this movie, but okay, so the most recent book that I read, Volume 8, like, half of it is basically just covering how the various characters in the Great Tomb of Nazareth just kind of go about their day-to-day business. Like, it is incredibly slice of life, despite the first half of the book basically being a miniature war between a small village and some monsters that are trying to invade it. It's a weird juxtaposition, but it's not unwelcome. It is quite good. I am definitely enjoying this series, and I do wish to continue on until it ends, which apparently it either is coming close to an end or has already ended, but I'll find that out when I get that far. Like I said before, there is an anime and manga adaptation, which is probably why the novel series got brought over to the US, and I'm glad that it did, but I haven't actually seen either of those, so while the anime for sure is the more well-known of the media, I'm sticking to the novels because I like that.
All right. My recommendation is.
You were kind of zoning out because you've heard a lot of this before.
Yeah, I'm also in the middle of a D&D session, so I'm doing double time. No, my recommendation is Barefoot Gen. No, I'm just kidding. I would never recommend something so horrible.
I don't even know.
It's a anime movie from the 80s that is quite in graphic detail the bombing of Hiroshima.
Oh.
It's the famous anime with the scene of the girl's entire body being vaporized and her eyes melting out. I don't know if you've seen that, Jeff.
I'm pretty confident I've seen that.
Yeah, it's a very dark movie, but that is not my recommendation. My recommendation is, fuck it, I've been watching it for like the last month. My recommendation is old Doctor Who. I don't need to say any more, because anybody who doesn't know what Doctor Who is, feel free to look it up. You'll get way more satisfaction looking it up for yourself. Anybody that does, I definitely recommend just, the first 4 Doctors. After that, it gets a bit touch and go from there.
Personally, I really only watched the Christopher Eccleston season.
Yeah.
Which was basically the reboot. And I really enjoyed it. For those of you who don't want to look it up, Doctor Who is about a strange man known simply as the Doctor, who has a police box that is bigger on the inside and which allows him to travel through space and time and go on so many different adventures encountering various historical figures and aliens and other such monsters.
Yeah, pretty much. There's currently 14 doctors.
70. I don't know.
There's 13 named doctors. There's a doctor who's an intermediate between the 8th and the 9th, the war doctor. And then there's also one that has sort of kind of ruined the entire canon of the series and has it's kind of ruined my fandom of the series. Like, it was such a terrible decision for this to happen in my mind that it really diminishes everything that happens before it. The whole timeless child controversy. Basically, it's like, oh, that first Doctor? Well, he's not actually the first Doctor. And you know what else? The original Doctor is actually like this secret fucking experiment that the Time Lords experimented on that managed to break loose, steal a TARDIS, and thus has been traveling ever since. And it's just like, no! It fucking ruins everything that the Doctor was beforehand. Why is it that he has to be the center of the goddamn universe? And this has been something that has been tracking since the 10th Doctor, even. The center of the fucking universe, the savior of everybody. And it's not what he is. The Doctor, for all intents and purposes, he is a strange alien who lives inside a blue police box, traveling through time and space, getting in wacky adventures.
He is literally foaming at the mouth.
Why can it not just be that? Why does it have to be such a fucking cosmic ballet of, the Time Lords invented him, instead of, he is a Time Lord, and he's just super smart, he's super rebellious, and
I'm assuming that the audience knows just about as much about what you were just saying as I do.
So,
and I actually understand what you were talking about.
The Timeless Child is the last season, the most recent season of Doctor Who, where it sets up this whole thing of, what's the Doctor's actual origins? And then it turns out that that the Doctor, the original Doctor, is a black woman. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's not the point. The point is that it was very poorly written and very contrived. It's just like, you don't have to do this. You don't have to keep trying to explain his backstory. The whole point is that it's a mystery, right?
For anybody who is confused as to what he means by the original Doctor, the series has a gimmick where whenever the actor playing the character wants to leave the show, they can, and they will just be replaced with a new actor who's playing the same character with maybe a few personality quirks and costumes. But it is the same character across the entire series, despite being played by different actors. Clever move on the writer's part, especially considering how long the series has been going on for, and how long dead the first actor is.
Yeah. The first three Doctors have been have passed away since the 90s. So, yeah. Tom Baker is still alive. He's in his 80s. The 13 main Doctors. There's William Hartnell, 19. The show started in 63. So that should give you sort of an idea of how old this show is. The original run of the series was 1963 to 1989. And
there was a movie in between them.
There was a movie in 96, and then the series came back in 2005.
Which is the season that I watched.
And so fans have sort of, they have a dichotomy between the two. There's old Who and there's new Who. And the era that we're in right now is, of course, new Who. And the original show from 63 to 89 is considered classic Who, as it's called.
It's kind of like Kamen Rider.
Yes.
Like if you take the first several seasons, those all came out during the Showa era of Japanese history. And then from Kuga onwards, which was 2000 for the record, that was the Heisei period until just a few years ago when they entered the Reiwa period. And that's how they distinguished Kamen Rider. There's actually been a lot more Kamen Rider in Heisei than there was in Showa, but that's besides the point. I'm just offering that as a point of comparison as I understand it.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So Doctor Who, yeah, definitely recommended, even if
if it does infuriate you.
Yeah, it's a your mileage may vary kind of show. It really depends on where you start. And if you're gonna watch old Who, there's 3 eras thereabouts that I would recommend. There's the black and white era, which is 60s Who. There's the 70s era, which is arguably the best. It is arguably the best, the highlight of both new Who and old Who. And then there's the 80s Who, which is where the show's quality drops to a point where one of the Doctors ended up getting fired midway through their contract. Shit's insane. The 80s Who is insane just because it's a lot of bad writing, And none of it is the actors' faults. They're doing the best they can with the show that also are, frankly, already low budget, that has basically gotten to the bottom of the barrel as far as budget goes. And the show tried desperately in 89 and 88 to turn it around, but to no avail, and it was just eventually canceled. So yeah.
I'm surprised I don't have a Dalek on my
That
set
is true.
anywhere.
Why don't you?
Shut up. And I'm not even going to explain what a Dalek is. Go watch Doctor Who. You got a lot of work cut out for you. Especially if you want to watch those Lost episodes.
Right.
But I think we should circle back and actually get back to the movie now that we've got the spoiler portion taken care of. We're diving into more spoilery territory here. So it's either Stern or Hopkins who spots Sarah watching the burning through her window, and they realize that if she's there, that means that Richard knows that she's there, and if word gets to him about what's going on, it could be a problem for them.
Yeah.
So they hope to get to talk with the local magistrate and basically drum up false witch charges against Sarah and Richard.
Mm-hmm.
Richard manages to get to Sarah before Hopkins does, but they don't get very far, unfortunately.
Ah, well.
And then the jilted husband shows up and gets stabbed for his troubles.
Pretty much. Yeah, that sounds about right.
No, he gets shot. He gets shot. He pulls a knife on Hopkins, Stern, and the other villager that they've got working with them. But Hopkins pulls a gun and shoots the guy. But he doesn't die until after Richard's men show up to investigate and learn what has happened. So they are rushing to the magistrate's castle to try and save their captain and his wife from being horribly tortured.
Yeah, this thing just this thing goes
zoom.
This thing goes from 0 to 100 in like the span of 2 minutes, and it's just like now.
And it is a crazy race to the end of the movie.
It's a race against time, and the thing that happens is the soldiers get there and shit, and they're trying to break in and everything, but Richard breaks out
of his confines before,
and he knocks Stern down, and what he does is he digs his healed foot into his eye, like basically
gouging his eye out with his heel.
He grabs an axe and
just starts wailing into Hopkins. And then Richard's men show up, and seeing the brutality that's going on, grab a gun and shoot Hopkins, killing him, and thus robbing Richards of his revenge.
Right?
Which he shouts angrily about repeatedly. And then the movie ends.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. Like everybody goes insane. Richard goes insane. Sarah goes nuts. The movie ends with her screaming because she's basically mentally broken at this point. And that's how the movie ends. And when it ended, both of us were like, "Fuck."
I mean, not necessarily a bleak ending, but certainly not a happy one.
It's a very bittersweet one.
The bad guys are dead, but their impact remains. And like we said, that's not actually what happened to Hopkins and Stern.
Yeah.
They were able to retire from witch finding in the aftermath of the witch hunts. They were able to presumably live out the rest of their days relatively safe from the atrocities they inflicted.
Yeah.
And I think Hopkins even went on to write a book about witch hunting, which was then used in the new colonies during the New England witch hunts.
So yeah, this guy has a fucking shitty legacy, and yeah, he's pretty rightfully rude as a villain, as a historical villain.
And nobody is quite sure how he died. Some say he died of tuberculosis.
A couple of other people say that he got what was coming to him, which is, I don't believe. I'm pretty sure he ended up suffering liver cirrhosis.
There's also like one claim that he was subjected to the swimming test.
And ended up drowning. Yeah, I think what ended up happening is because at the time, you had two options: drinking water or drinking alcohol, and I think he ended up just drinking himself to death. That's probably pretty accurate because it said he had kidney problems and liver stuff. Was it? So I think he ended up just getting like liver cancer or something, or tuberculosis, what have you.
Plural tuberculosis.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that means. It's not like plural as in multiple. It's like plural as in Pleural. And unfortunately, that doesn't have a blue link in Wikipedia, so I have no idea what that's supposed to mean.
Ah, well. So what'd you think of the movie?
That was a trip.
I don't think it's a movie I'd ever watch again.
Right.
Just because you see it once and you're just like, well, that
was enough for me.
That was enough for me. It's not.
I would definitely say check it out.
It's worth watching, but I would definitely say it's not a Last House on the Left level of uncomfortable. That movie is just so miserable. And
I have never seen that, and I pray I don't have to because I've heard the reputation.
Well, what do you know? We're gonna watch it next Halloween. No, I'm kidding. I
would be down to watching some more John or
Wes Craven stuff.
Wes Craven.
I would not. Yeah, I would not put that on anybody. Whenever somebody asks me, "Hey, Last House on the Left, do you think I should watch it?" I'm always like, yes, but there's always a caveat. But
do so willingly.
But. Bring some friends with you. Just like have a group with you. Don't watch it alone. Not because it's scary, but because it's very uncomfortable and can really can really just fuck with your head.
Speaking of messed up movies, I was back when I first watched Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad, which was the American adaptation of a show called Hyper Agent Gridman. It was a show for kids, and there was an episode where they were kind of having a sleepover at the school because that was one of only 2 sets they had. Sorry, 3 sets they had. And the lunch lady, who is just an absolute character in and of herself, she decided to bring along some watching material for the sleepover, which included Psycho, one other movie I can't remember offhand, and I Spit on Your Grave.
Yeah.
like what the fuck?
Yeah. You know what? The holy grail of uncomfortable, the holy trio of uncomfortable movies. 40 Days of Sodom.
Yeah, gonna avoid that one.
Yep. 40 Days of Sodom, Cannibal Holocaust, and I Spit on Your Grave. The holy trilogy.
Solo. That's the other name for that first movie you mentioned.
Yes. For anybody who doesn't know what 40 Days of Sodom is, it's basically a World War II era movie about a group of aristocrats that basically purchase a bunch of peasants.
Teenagers.
A bunch of teenage peasants, and does a bunch of horrible shit to them for 40 days. You want to know how the movie ends? Every teenager fucking dies. And what do the aristocrats do? They fucking go scot-free. Nothing happens to them.
Well, thankfully, I no longer have to watch that movie.
Yeah.
I wasn't planning on it, but thankfully, I no longer have to.
There's a coprophagia scene.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm glad I never have to see that movie.
If anybody who doesn't know what coprophagia is,
Good.
good. It's like...
No, don't explain it.
It's like people say, oh, Human Centipede, that's an uncomfortable movie. No, that one's just a dumb movie. It's a dumb movie with, the premise, the premise is kind of off-putting and creepy, but in execution, the movie is dumb. 40 Days of Sodom is just, let's film a bunch of bad shit happening. Let's think of the worst things that we can do to a human being, and let's do it. Let's film it and put it out there for people to see. Blah.
I also hear a Serbian film is pretty messed up, but... But at this point, we're just going off about movies that are just absolutely messed up, and really, you should only check those out if you're a sick fuck who's morbidly curious. I have no intention of checking any of that stuff out. No thanks. We never did give a star rating before the recommendations, so I'm going to give a
solid 3. It's not. No, we're doing 10 stars. That's right.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's solid 6.5.
I give it a 7.
6.5. It's worth watching, but you never. It's not a movie you need to watch again. It's a movie that you'll rent it for a weekend, you'll watch it, you'll return it, and you'll never talk about it again.
Unless you have to do a podcast.
Unless you have to do a fucking crummy podcast with your brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a damn good thing we don't have to deal with that.
Fucking shithead.
Next fortnight, we will be bringing you another Vincent Price movie. What is it? Well, I know, but I'm not telling you.
Yeah.
You're just going to have to wait to find out. I mean, he's got a lot of movies. It could be any one of them. It could be, I don't know, The Raven, or dare I say it, The Raven. It's not The Raven.
Yeah.
Bye. Awkward pause.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.